our fabulous speakers who are still with us have turned on their videos, but we've also been joined by Cat Bell, who is not an interloper. We have invited her very purposefully. So Cat, if you want to find that mute button. So Cat is here with two hats on. So firstly, she does work within Rio Tinto, so one of the world's largest mining companies, and has got huge experience with regards to working inside Rio Tinto, but is also the founder of the Young Mining Professionals Network as well. So Kat, I don't know if you want to quickly introduce yourself so that we all know who you are, and then I'm just going to invite you for any comments on things that have resonated with you from the talks that you've managed to catch at the end of today's session. So Kat, do you want to introduce yourself first?
Sure, thanks Sarah, really appreciate being invited. I hope you can all hear me.
Yep.
Yes, great. So yeah, Cat Bell, I'm a geologist by background, so I know there's a few in the panel, and but yeah, have been working across various different roles in mining for the last 10 years, and I started Young Mining Professionals in the UK a few years ago. But really, you know, what drives me, so my passion is to try and collaborate across the globe with the new entrants into the mining sector and ensure that mining in the future is that sustainable, you know, the ideal mining vision that we all have, and what tools can we equip the new entrants coming in to realize that mission, as they're going to be the leaders of the future. So that's my primary purpose, I suppose. And sort of the day job just comes along with that. But yeah, in terms of what's resonated today, look, I think, and I unfortunately I didn't manage to capture the first two speakers, but it's the, I mean, I suppose everyone who's been invited does have a passion around at least one element of this, but it just seems that there's so much good you know, progress that has been made, lots of people coming together, although we're sort of at this sort of, I feel like it's like we're almost about to take off in terms of how we all collaborate. And I think, you know, this conferences like this and just the volume of people having these really important conversations is only ever going to be you know, beneficial in how we can all collectively achieve the aims of more responsible sourcing. So, and you know, I was just listening to Ian's talk in terms of communication. I just think that's such an important one. And in terms of the co-creating that narrative, I was thinking how do we actually reach out to those that are going to be really affected by this message and create it with them in terms of changing the narrative around mining. I think that's a really, yeah, I'm struggling to think quite how we make that first engagement, you know, because getting the adversaries and everyone who isn't necessarily across the benefits mining can bring to the table to have that discussion and start that element of co-creation, I think is an interesting question. So that's my initial reflections. Thanks, Sarah.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Kat. We'll come back to you in a second, but I'm going to take you up on that question that you were posing to Ian there and say, perhaps Ian, if you are trying to work with people who really, you know, they don't like mining or they don't like what it is that you're talking about, do you have any suggestions as to how you begin to address that? And perhaps also the co-creation is one of those avenues that can be explored.
Yeah, I think it requires from our side a complete mindset change. It was touched on earlier when we talked about this social environment, and I think that make and sell territory is the mindset is education. We just need to educate them. The interesting one, the one I find most problematic, is the sense and respond, which is essentially about persuasion. How do we persuade them that we're right? And we do that through, as was pointed out, highlighting the economic contributions, the social contributions, all that stuff. But actually what we don't tend to do is like start off with a discussion about actually, is it the right thing? And this notion of having it around equity and the human rights and things like that is a really powerful, and if you're going to go there, you have to start the conversation in that community about what is right for them. And it's really hard, to get companies and universities and researchers to do that, because we are trained to be the expert, to be the specialist. So to shed all that, put it aside, and then just to talk to people about what's good for them. I think other people around the screen will have more experience in that, but I think that's really difficult.
No, I'm going to come straight to Susan, actually, maybe to comment on this, because I think that there's that case of we've seen plenty of mining companies change the mine design, etc., as they've been listening to local communities, where they've gone, actually, yeah, maybe our initial way of doing this wasn't the right way, type thing. So kind of that listening backwards actually then helps to improve whatever is the outcome. I don't know, Susan, if you've got any thoughts on what Ian's just said.
Yeah, I mean, I think the critical line in the sand is we've got more examples of adjusting and adapting something once the decision's already made, because we actually started to listen to people, and we knew that we could make the impacts less serious or do more to accommodate. I don't know of I think companies are starting to get to the point where they are seriously going to engage communities before they make the big investments and get so far down the road with the capital at stake that they are no longer in a position financially to feel like they can walk away. And this might be an interesting question for Elaine, because Newmont is certainly one of those companies that has been working on this. So the question is, do we yet have an example of a mine that has been brought into production with a pre-agreed, fully, it would never be 100%, but with sort of a pre-agreed engagement process that led to a number of trade-offs and agreements about what will this look like and what will it look like after closure, and I think also bringing that full arc of this is a temporary activity, and where does it get us at the end of that activity? Are we as a community, as a people, better off at that point? And is that a choice that we will make as an interim activity to get us to where we want to be? And how local is that decision? Is that decision really local, regional, national? We're still figuring it out. And I really appreciated Ian's insights on the communication piece, because it really gave me some new conceptual language to wrap around what we see going on.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Susan. That's fantastic. And Elaine, you know that I'm going to take that beautiful question that Susan just teed up there and pass it straight across to you, if you want to answer even just an incy-wincy aspect of it.
Well, I think there are mining companies that are, we're still learning how to do this. You have to listen to people, you have to listen early, you have to demonstrate that you're willing to change your plans. There are examples of mining companies that have walked away from assets or properties when they didn't have community agreement. Rio Tinto has at least one strong example of that. And I think Newmont has said recently, the CEO in British Columbia, that, if they truly are not wanted, that they won't develop their assets. I can't speak for either of those companies right now, but there are examples of that. But, it's really difficult to change your mindset. If you're truly doing free, prior, and informed consent, you're having those conversations before the geologists even know they really have something that's economic to develop. And that's a really hard thing to figure out. How do you balance that? Because, I don't know what the number is. Is it 1 in 1,000 exploration opportunities, are worth taking further, and even fewer than that actually get developed? So it's really complicated, but I think the best companies are trying, are sincerely understanding they must listen better than they've listened in the past. And that, You can't just throw money at a problem. You can't have transactional relationships that fall apart. That, you know, long-term success is built on building trust, and trust is built on not just what you say, but what you do.
Brilliant. Thanks with that, Elaine. Kat, maybe if I can come back to yourself, and especially on that comment that Elaine mentioned, that, you know, you need to be thinking about this stuff and considering it well before a geologist even knows that there may well be something in the ground. From your experience, do you have anything to build on that?
I think it's just absolutely from the first boot on the ground, you're still having an impact on that community. And even if there's, you know, the possibility that the likelihood that won't translate to a resource or then a mine, just that to be transparent completely with the objectives of the work that you're doing, and keeping and carrying the communities along with you on the journey and educating at every stage is just, I just think it's an absolute vital component of any exploration project. And, you know, fostering those relationships as early as possible will just make any sort of consent further down the line that much easier, because you will have those deep, trustful relationships, which are so important. Thanks for that, Kat.
So I think, I mean, this is also something as well where, because we're thinking about really big timeframes here, long timeframes, because as we know, it takes at least 10 years to go from someone saying, I think there might be something in the ground here, and with the permission to be able to get it out from the ground, through to a fully commissioned mine. So we're talking huge timescales that are perhaps, Ian, they align with those green swans, etc. Now, Paul, I know that you are itching to make a comment with regards to green swans, and then after that, perhaps Ludivine, if I can come to yourself, because I know you've got plenty of comments on this. So Paul.
Thank you. Well, it's yes, I'm quite excited about it, because for I suppose quite a sad reason, actually, that I guess certainly people in the UK will know about John Elkington. Well-respected, great communicator, triple bottom line, cannibals with forks. You know, he's been around. You know, he's done it all, hasn't he? And published it all. Great communicator. But I'm guessing fewer people actually know there is another Green Swans book that came out around the same time, and this is from the that excellent bunch of communicators known as the Bank for International Settlements, which is very transparent and has lots of co-creation in the production of all its documents, as I'm sure you can see. I still don't quite know how it operates, but they produced a Green Swan report, which has a slightly different, I mean, it was all done completely independently and it has a different view. But I look at the bank's report, and I read that, and I get more out of that than I got out of reading John Elkington's, because to me, this is about an absolutely fundamental global change to the way money's considered. And, you know, that would drive and practical considerations and all that. But I'm guessing it's probably reach beyond people in the banking and regulatory system is probably zero. So I don't know, there's this kind of conflict over, there's this really interesting stuff that is produced somewhere, I don't know where it was produced, and it comes out and it's really interesting, but I'm sure it does have traction with the European Central Bank and the regulators, but actually, could that be of interest to society, what this all means? I mean, I'm sure in its current form it isn't, but I think, you know, it could be. And it addresses things like timescales as well, because, you know, you're looking at capital requirements and massing assets and liabilities over a long time period, particularly if you're talking about project finance and things like that, and capital requirements. So anyway, sorry, I just wanted to throw that in because I never get to mention that report. And I don't think I've ever mentioned it, and I probably won't ever mention it again.
No, Paul, I think we're all going to go away and read that one now as well. And if you've got the link to it, please stick it into chat.
I will do.
Yeah. Fantastic. Ludivine, let's come to you for your comments. And then what we're going to do just to finish off is we're going to go around our virtual panel that we have here. And I'm going to ask you the one question, which is what ESG tool, so from your perspective, what ESG tool or approach do you think is having or has the potential to have the biggest impact on making ESG a reality? Okay, so if you can pick one, okay, or a few if you want, what is the single tool that will move this conversation or move reality on so that we're actually making ESG something that is real rather than just something that is talked about? So Ludivine, just come for your general comments first, and then perhaps I can start off with Susan for what ESG tool do you think will have the biggest impact or is having the biggest impact? So Ludivine, just for your general thoughts first.
Oh, sorry, my connection seems unstable. Yeah, general thoughts. It's just we've discussed a lot about companies or projects and how they position, but the reality on the ground is that there's never a project or a company. There's usually a network of mining companies or exploration companies working in the same area. And so perhaps one of the things we could explore more as an industry is to build up better united messages, more solidarity amongst operators, and to leverage off of one another's positive or negative experiences to allow people to understand mining over time rather than try to rewrite the book every single time we arrive somewhere. And as to the single most efficient or useful tool, well, of course, I'm going to say, applying all the governance tools that there is, but I really continue to think that what's going to make the most change is stakeholders realizing that they never belong to a single category. So every single one of us is a consumer, every single one of us is a voter, every single one of us is potentially a policy activist, every single one of us is an investor, we all have savings. So for me, it's more this notion that, we are all connected through various aspects of this loop. So you're not making one-off decisions at one point, you're making a series of choices towards improving collective benefits over a whole value chain. It's not the same approach. And I think that will probably yield the most change in mentality.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Ludivine. Susan, what about your thoughts? And then we'll go to James.
Well, I might reflect a bit of a cynic after the years I've been in the industry, but I think it's activists, insurers, and investors that know their stuff and are pushing the substantive questions and the kind of things that your speakers were talking about today, looking for verification. I think it's really shifting the bar. I know that's what I'm hearing. And I have, mining companies that are saying that they're getting calls about, they're getting calls from activist investors about how they've performed against benchmarking, public benchmarking studies and things like that. So
that's the sort of holding to account, etc., and that verification that's coming through. Brilliant. Thanks, Susan. James, how about yourself? And then we'll go to Emma.
A difficult one for me because, I'm a bit of a newcomer. But I think it's, for me, it's a realization that everyone can have a part, and nobody's contribution is not worthwhile, and it all has value. But I would also say, and it's something that lots of people have said before, but when people say that there's no competition with safety, with the health and safety, and we should all work together, I think the same could be said of ESG issues. It's not a competition. What we're trying to do is enhance and improve for everyone. And why not? Because there is no competition.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, James. Emma, how about yourself? And then we'll go to Paul.
Single issue, I think, is pretty.
Oh, have we just lost Emma? We'll come back to Emma in a second. Paul, straight on to yourself, sir.
Okay, well, the tool, I mentioned it already.
Changing the way that we sort of talk about.
Oh.
Okay, keep going, Paul, and we'll just quickly.
All right, yeah, that was a bit unusual. Scenario analysis is the tool, and I make a distinction between the generation of technical scenarios, lots of different temperatures and implications, and the translation of scenarios into action. And I think in the second bit is the key bit, the less understood bit, where anybody can get involved, because we can all think about how this might affect us within organizations, but more widely as well. So look at the different, dealing with uncertainty, looking at different futures and deciding what we want.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that, Paul. Emma, we're going to try you again because you froze. Don't worry, you still look beautiful when you froze. It wasn't one of these nasty ones. But let's come to you for your comments. And then we're going to go to Ian.
Yeah, I think picking a single issue is hard. I would say that we shouldn't underestimate the value of sort of legislation in this. That I think we've kind of talked a lot about how companies are kind of setting ESG dynamics, how investors, how all these parties are kind of affecting it. But fundamentally, I'd like to be, I think, hearing a bit more about how citizens in a country are setting ESG requirements and how the government's kind of translating that into legislation. I think I'd like to see the citizens of a country and the governments of a country kind of be more involved, at least, than I think they are now in ESG conversations, and kind of possibly see that sort of translate or effectively translate through to legislation. Because I think, you know, sometimes we kind of lose in this, that who is setting this conversation for who, you know, who is telling the people of Malawi that their social benefits are being set by BlackRock. I don't, you know, there's something in there that I think we could benefit more from. I think everybody just working more collaboratively in this space than sort of, you know, everybody bringing their own individual thoughts to the table, which are valuable, but probably more valuable if we're all kind of doing it collectively.
So it's a collaborative moving forward rather than, I guess, the opposite, which is everybody stepping back and expecting somebody else to do it as well, which would not be a good way of thinking. Brilliant. Thank you very much, Emma. Ian, let's come to yourself next, and then we'll go to Elaine.
Well, I'm going to have to go with communication. It's that shift for people-centered communications, switching away from the conveyancing of matters of fact that we've been so expert in, or I think we have for so long, to developing authentic dialogues around matters of concern. That's what I'd go for.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ian. Elaine, how about yourself? And then we'll go to Kat.
Well, I hesitate to say there's a single tool that will make the biggest change in the ESG world, but the TCFD modeling exercise is significant in the way it's getting companies to think. But I think the biggest thing that's happened recently, you know, is investors taking an interest finally in the fact that social and environmental performance not only will lead to better financial performance, but helps manage and mitigate risk. And shining a bright light on that in a way that demands companies to respond and measure and disclose in a more quantitative and holistic way, I think has been able to shift the conversation and is going to shift performance. And I just think that is significant. I think you can't wait on governments and regulation, that you have to be ahead of that and pushing on that from other stakeholder vantage points.
Yeah, no, definitely. I totally agree with you on that. I think there has been a big step change actually since finance kind of came to the table in a bigger way. And then, yes, and regulation often in many things sometimes lags a little bit, perhaps, in terms of just that timing, but it shouldn't be an excuse to wait for that regulation, etc. So I guess to Emma's comment as well there. Brilliant. Thank you, Elaine. And Kat, how about yourself?
I'd say education, because, and that's not just thinking about school age university, that's education throughout the whole, both industry and externally around this. And I think that will lead to empowerment of everyone to make good decisions, because ultimately activation comes from decisions that every individual makes. And if collectively all those decisions are informed by a good base of education within this space, then collectively that will have the biggest impact. But I suppose that's a bit of a escape from thinking of one tool, because I think that captures actually pretty much what everyone has said. But I was trying to, I couldn't distill it to one, because it is very much a collaboration that we can achieve together.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that, Kat. So I am not surprised at all that people have found it difficult to pick on the one tool, because of course this is something that needs lots and lots of tools. And certainly when the organising group that were putting together this conference started thinking about that infographic, you can see that infographic has just grown and grown and grown with all of these different tools, tips, tricks, techniques, approaches that perhaps needs to be in place to ensure that we see this responsibility really coming into our raw materials as a whole. Now I can see there is some fantastic commentary going on in chat. Chat has just gone mad, which is brilliant. So thank you very much, everybody. Keep that chat coming. Keep the Q&As coming. This is, so we've only just scratched the surface. Okay, so this is the first of many sections of this conference. And tomorrow, so tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. UK time. So for those of you who I am sure watching on the recorded video from Australia, because at the moment you should hopefully be fast asleep. So tomorrow morning, hopefully you'll be able to dial in live. Tomorrow we're going to actually start to hear from people like Hugo Brody from the London Metal Exchange. So where do they view things like ESG? We're going to be speaking with Victor Carrera, Ruth Allington, a whole variety of different aspects that we're going to be considering here from a wealth of different people coming at ESG within raw materials from different perspectives. So that will all be tomorrow morning. And then in tomorrow afternoon, we've got Lucy Crane and Ben Lepley really looking at the public perception of mining. So I suspect building on some of what Ian has perhaps spoken about today, through into finishing off with looking at mining for the triple bottom line. So this is going to be an interactive session with Catherine McCallum and friends, shall I say, with regards to that. So really looking at trying to get some of this ESG tools to really work. And that's just Tuesday. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, this goes on until Friday. Please do feel free to dip in and out of the conference, because we do know that there's a huge amount of time that needs to be invested into it. Everything is being recorded, and where possible, we will also be posting all of these lovely links that people have been sharing with us in the chat. We will be sharing those as well through the website. Two final things. Kat mentioned earlier on training, for example, and making sure that our young professionals get the training that they require to ensure that actually we do push the industry forward in a responsible way. As mentioned at the beginning of today, there are 3 training courses on which we've had lots and lots of sponsorship that's come in, which is great. We could do with some more sponsorship, so there's a hint. All the sponsorship goes to paying for people to get free seats on the training courses. So if you're interested in either sponsoring or coming on the training course, have a little look at the webpage, and also email Ellen at ellen@satala.com, and she'll be able to sort you out, hopefully with a space. And if not, she'll be able to give you more information on that. Also, secondly, there is our challenge, and yes, there will be prizes for this. Last year, we invited you all to draw a picture of a mine. So what do you think a mine looked like? This year, we're asking you to draw a picture of what do you think a responsible mining operation looks like. These pictures can be drawn on the back of envelopes, on the back of bills. It can be drawn on your computer and sent in. It doesn't matter. They can be drawn in sand on the beach. There's a nice sustainable way of doing it. Send them in to us at hello@responsiblerawmaterials.com, because that really allows us to actually understand the different perspectives and perceptions of what mining should really be looking like, and how do we make materials and raw materials all the more responsible. Now I'm looking at Rose, who is the organizing genius that sits behind this conference. Is there anything else I need to say, Rose? She's shaking her head. I think I'm okay. I'm 2 minutes over on our time for today. But ladies and gentlemen, I know that you've got questions that we haven't managed to answer. We will endeavour to answer them as we go through the course of this week. But please join me in putting your hands together for one final massive round of applause and thank you to our fabulous speakers who have been with us for this session. Thank you very, very much. And ladies and gentlemen, we look forward to seeing you tomorrow morning